In this week's project, I remodel my pantry. A few weeks back, I remodeled one of my corner pantries. This kitchen actually has two. This is the other one, and it's time for it to get a facelift too. In my video last week, I showed you how I created a custom-made pull-out garbage can drawer so I could get the garbage cans out of this pantry and out of the way. Now that those are out of there, I can really go to work in taking this pantry apart and putting it back together the way I want it to be. So let's get to it. The first thing to do is to clean out the closet. One of the reasons that I want to redo this pantry is that I hate the old wire shelving. Things fall through the gaps and it sags if you put anything heavy on the shelf. Removing the old shelving isn't hard, but because they're put into the walls with anchors, I'll need to yank them out and then patch all the holes. After mudding and sanding, now it's time to paint. Painting isn't really necessary, but I want it to look nice and I have extra paint, and so why not? Now that the closet's all prepped with all of the screw holes patched and the closet's been painted, I'm ready to get started with the cleats. Cleats are essentially the shelf, so to speak, the shelves themselves are going to rest upon. I'm planning on screwing those cleats into studs to give them that extra strength, and we'll just set the shelves on top of those. And so what I need to do before I install those is I need to drill what are called pilot holes. A pilot hole is just a hole that you drill into the wood to give the screw space so that when you do actually drill the screw in to whatever you're screwing it into, it doesn't split the wood. I use a stud finder so that I can measure my pilot holes and make sure that the screws go into the studs for added strength. Before I drill the pilot holes, I'm using a countersink drill bit to make sure that the screw heads are flush with the boards. For the cleats, I'm going to be using pine boards that I picked up just from the local hardware store. They're 3/4 of an inch thick and 1.5 inches wide. I painted my boards, but again, you wouldn't have to do that. Now to install the cleats, there's a couple tools you're going to need. You're definitely going to need a level, as well as a screwdriver, a pencil, and a tape measure. So the first cleat on my side is going to be at 18 inches. That'll be the top of the first shelf. So I'm going to measure right here at 18 inches. Do it on two sides. Take my board that I marked, make sure it's the right spot. Set it up against these lines at the right height. Take my level. Grab a screw. Drive it in. The challenge with cleats in a closet like this is the walls aren't straight. When they frame them, over time the wood warps, or they just didn't do a great job of framing it, so walls just generally aren't straight. So you do the best you can, and it's okay if the wood bows just a little bit, but we'll do this on all sides, all the way around. Done with the cleats. You'll notice that I added a bevel on the cleats that are on the left and right side. This softens them a bit so they don't stick out too much and there's not any hard corners. All right, the pantry is prepped, it's ready to go. We're ready to put in shelves. And the material that I'm gonna use for my shelves is gonna be what's called melamine. Melamine is, essentially a particle board that's coated with a coating, kind of like a paint, that makes it waterproof. It's easy to wipe, it's easy to clean. It's great for an application like this, especially for a kitchen pantry. There are other materials that you could use, an MDF, which is a medium density fiber board, particle board. You could use things like that. If you do that, you wanna make sure that you paint it so that it's sealed. If you don't care what it looks like, if this is, you know, a basement closet or storage room or something like that, you're fine. But if it's any place where you expect maybe oil or something else to spill, you want to make sure that you paint that. You can buy pre-made melamine shelves. They do get a little bit pricey. What I tend to do is I will buy a full sheet, 4x8 sheet of melamine and cut it myself, and then install what's called the edge banding, which is just the band over the edge to make sure that it's sealed. I found that the best way to cut any kind of sheet good is by using a track saw and a large foam pad underneath it for support. A circular saw or table saw can also work, but it's hard to cut it straight unless you have a large cabinet table saw and some help. This way is much easier. In fact, I've seen a lot of people actually cut it on the ground with the foam pad resting on the ground. I have mine resting on sawhorses. You can also have them cut sheets for you at the hardware store. They usually don't charge for a few cuts, and that can make it easier to fit pieces in smaller vehicles. In order to put the edge banding on the edge of your melamine shelf or cabinet or whatever it is you're building, there's a couple of tools that you're going to need. The first is the edge banding itself. You can pick it up at Amazon. I'm sure that some hardware stores sell. I bought that from Amazon. You can buy it in different sizes. The one thing you want to make sure that when you buy it, to make sure that the thickness is more than the thickness of the material you're cutting. So this is 3/4 of an inch. I need to have some excess that I'll trim off, but without that, you run the risk of maybe not having full coverage. The other thing you're going to need is some scissors to cut it. You're also going to need an edge trimmer. You can use utility knife just fine, but this is a custom-made edge trimmer for this job. That's what it's used for, and it works really well to cut off the excess. The other thing you're going to need is an iron, and the reason you need an iron is that the iron is what melts the glue on the edge banding and allows it to glue to the surface. The first step is to cut a length of edge banding with a little bit of excess on the end. So I'll just take my scissors and cut that. From there, I'll grab the iron. You'll want to add the edge banding, and I just kind of do it slowly as I go, starting at one end so you get that full coverage, and just go slowly with the iron. You can smell the glue melting. I have heard of some people that like to use a cloth between the iron and the edge banding because they say that it sometimes burns. I've never had that happen to me, but that's certainly an option. Maybe it depends upon the iron that you use. All right, so once I get all the way to the end, I'll come back slowly. You want to make sure that you melt all that glue. The other thing I'll do is if I have any excess, a little extra on the edges, I'll make sure to cut those. If not, they have a tendency to kind of pull if you happen to snag on them. Once you've added the edge banding itself, you'll take this tool to trim it. Start on one end, and it'll just slice it. So we'll turn it over, and then you'll do the same to the other side. It's not a bad idea to just sand that edge a bit. This is 220 sandpaper, and that works perfect. With the shelves built, it's time to install them. Whenever you're installing the shelves, you want to make sure you start at the top. If you start at the bottom, it'll make it very difficult to work your way up. I'm putting a few dabs of construction adhesive on the top of the cleats to hold the shelves in place. You could screw the shelves down or even nail them in, but I don't want to mar the tops. I'm also adding a small plate at the seam of the two pieces so that the shelves are level. I made these, but you could also just buy them. Lastly, I will install a brace for the shorter shelves that have cleats on only 2 sides and not 3 to ensure that there is enough support to hold those heavier appliances. From here, I finish installing the rest of the shelves, and then I'm done. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, and also be sure to watch my next video where I show you how I install LED lights into this pantry.